Hey YouTube, it's Ashley the therapist from Detroit. Um, Hello again, and welcome to another video about therapy, mental health, and just me being a therapist who's a normal person too, just like everybody else. It has been an eventful week. Last week we talked a lot about, I talked a lot about manipulation. And I want to kind of do another part to that. However, I did get another theme this past week. So, the theme this past week is the importance of having experiences even that are unpleasant. But I think that I'll get to that next week. I just wanted to put a little tidbit in there to remind me to come back around to that. And when I say experiences that are necessary, you ever went through something and you're just like, why did I have to go through that? What was the purpose? What did I need to get something from that? Am I being punished for something that I did? Why did I have to go through that type of hurt or that type of experience? And so that was the theme from this past week that I got a lot from my clients. So I'll I'll get back to that in my next video, depending on how long I'm going to be focusing on manipulation, because manipulation is it's a big umbrella. There are so many ways people can manipulate. There are so many ways people do manipulate, from jobs to relationships to friendships to parenting, all kind of stuff. And so it's so much to cover with the topic of manipulation and what that looks like and how to respond to it. So I'm not going to be giving therapy again. I always try to, make sure that I put that out there. But I will tell you about my personal experiences and how I've dealt with manipulation in the past, how I've done manipulation in the past, and how I respond to it differently today. Okay, because the way I responded to it back then was not the way that I would today. So, the example that I used in my last video, one of them was with a supervisor that I had, with my first one of my first jobs. I was like 18 years old and I was working at a J.C. Penney, and this lady, um, she was very intent on criticizing me and talking down to me. Now, this is under the manipulation umbrella because criticism is a form of manipulation. If you're using criticism to try to control somebody or make them feel some kind of way. So, for example, in this situation, she was trying to insult my intelligence. She was criticizing my intelligence if I'm smart enough to take feedback or like follow instructions or something like that. In reality, the instructions weren't clear, or I was getting instructions from one supervisor that was different from her, or, and I was still new. And so, whether or not it was, me performing based on my intelligence was not valid in that moment because I was a new employee and I didn't know all the ropes. And instead of her, um, and considering that, she wanted to focus it on how I was unable to follow um, directions or something like that. So if you didn't watch my last video, go back and watch it. But the example that I used was, um, when I was working, she had gave me something to do. I believe it was something that she wanted me to do, and either I didn't get it done or I didn't do it timely. But what happened is I think that if my memory serves me correctly, I think that there was another supervisor that had also told me to do something else. And when it came time for her to check in to see if I had done whatever it was she had asked me to do, she said um, something along the lines of, "Are you able to comprehend, or can you not follow simple instructions," or something to that extent. And as an 18-year-old girl, I didn't realize that as being like under an umbrella of manipulation, but it was. Not only was it critical in an underhanded, kind of not direct way, but it was also a little bit like gaslighting. And the reason why I say that is because she wanted me to she wanted me to question my reality, whether or not I was smart. And that was hurtful. That was hurtful. And so as an 18-year-old girl, I cried. Yeah, I cried like a little punk ass bitch at the time. And I didn't cry in front of her. Don't get me wrong, I didn't cry in the moment. But I recall crying at some point um, in private. I can't remember if I cried at home or if I went on a break and cried or whatever, but it really affected me. And had I knew then what I know now, I would have asked her not to talk to me like that. I would have probably said something very simple, something as simple as, I really don't appreciate the way you're talking to me. I really don't appreciate your tone with me. Um, something to that degree so she can take a step back and reflect on how she's coming across to people because it's not necessary. She didn't have to talk to me like that. She could have just simply said, hey, I really wanted you to do this thing in the future. If you are conflicted between what another supervisor is telling you or what I'm telling you, go ahead and do what I'm telling you. Or you can reach back out to me, find me, and ask me which should be priority. I understand you're new, and you're going to make some mistakes, but for future purposes, this is how to handle this situation. And it could have been simple as that. Instead, she chose to criticize and try to um, and maybe her intent was not to hurt my feelings. However, if she's going around talking to people like that, that is not positive and it's not healthy. So anyway, it's very important to watch how you talk to people. I find myself doing, well, I try not to as much, but I used to do things like that. And sometimes I try to make sure I'm being more mindful with my son because he's very sensitive. And so some things I'm saying might come across to him as criticism, and I don't always mean it to come off like that. But sometimes it is, right? Like sometimes there's no other way that it comes off other than a criticism. So for example, I might find myself, I know I've done this in the past and I'm not proud of it, but I might find myself criticizing him in ways where initially I don't realize the impact of it. And I'm trying to think of an example so that I can utilize this time as much as possible. If I can't think of it right here, right now, I'm going to just put it in the next video. But I might say something along the lines of, like, use your brain, son, use your brain. And so while that might seem harmless, um, while that might seem like it's not that big of a deal. So, for example, um, I might tell him to do something. I might tell him to wash the dishes. I don't know. And he might ask me, well, how do I stop the sink? How do I keep the water in the sink? And this is just a hypothetical, but I'm just trying to help you guys understand how I might come across it in sometimes. And so I can't think of a specific example, but this is as close to a specific one as I can come up with. So I might tell him to do the dishes. He might ask me, how do I stop with the sink? And I'm looking at the sink stopper right there at the sink. Now, mind you, he's 13, so these are things in my mind I'm like, he should be able to know how to do, right? He should be able to use his own critical thinking and kind of like figure this stuff out without asking me for every detail. So that's the perspective I'm coming from. However, when it comes out and I see the stopper right there, and I'm like, okay, this is a 13-year-old kid. He's super smart, super super smart. By the way, my son is like almost genius status. But I'm like, okay, he's super smart. Why would he not be able to put context clues together and figure this out? So in my mind, I'm thinking he's lazy. He's being lazy. He just doesn't want to use his own critical thinking skills because he just doesn't feel like it. That's where my mind goes to. And I know that y'all parents can relate to me when I'm saying this because I know I'm not the only one that thinks this way, even though it's unhealthy, right? Because I shouldn't even assume that he's just wanting to be lazy. I should assume that he's a 13-year-old kid who doesn't know everything, even though he's super smart, and he still needs guidance and he still needs support. That's where my mind should have gone, but it didn't. So the way that I start to come off is critical because I already have an idea in my mind that he's just being lazy and he's not trying to put in any effort. So I'm leading with those thoughts. I'm leading with that. I'm believing that. And so I would say things like, son, use your brain. There's the stopper right there. Now, I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't cuss. I wouldn't call them any names. But I would say, use your brain. And And to a certain degree, that is criticism, because even though I'm not saying, son, you're stupid, I am implying that he's not using his brain, which can be an implication that I am calling him stupid in a roundabout way. And so y'all might be listening to this like, he should have just used the stopper. It's sitting right there. I'm saying it because it's true. You said it because it's true, or whatever, whatever. But y'all got to start slowing your brains down and think about what's leading you. In that moment, I can honestly say that my belief that he was being lazy and that probably nothing could convince me otherwise in that moment, and that he just was unwilling to use his own critical thinking ability is what led me to criticize him in a roundabout way. Um, I don't know that he was being lazy, and in reality, he's a 13-year-old kid who is gonna need guidance still, and any guidance that he needs, I shouldn't make him feel bad for it as if he shouldn't need it, and so it's okay to assume, to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he just didn't know, or maybe he just had a slow moment in the moment, which we all have sometimes, right? I know I do, where I'm like, oh, duh, like, I should have thought about that, but I don't want to be made to feel stupid because I have a slow moment. And so I shouldn't be willing to perpetuate that same type of criticism on my son, especially when I know how that feels to have it done to me by somebody else. Let alone somebody that you love. I had it done by a few people that I love, but in that example, I had it done by a manager at a job, and that made me cry. So if that could make me cry by somebody that I don't even love, imagine it coming from somebody that you do love and care about and look up to, and they criticize you or put you down, or do something harmful like that. So criticism is under the umbrella of manipulation. It's not always like an intentional manipulation, but it's a way for you to try to get them to think how you want them to think or do what you want them to do. And manipulation is rooted in control. So if you're trying to get somebody to do what you want them to do or think how you want them to think, that's obviously you trying to control. So that's just scratching the surface of manipulative examples. You have things like gaslighting, you have things like guilt tripping. I saw recently, and I have not watched this season of Love is Blind, but I saw recently that one of the characters, or not characters, one of the people on the show was manipulating somebody. And I'll have to watch it just to really truly understand if it was real manipulation. But something along the lines of she didn't want to have sex with him, and he got to crying, and, he got to crying and talking about how he's so nice, and being nice is what allowed him to be, I don't know, lose or taken advantage of. Like I said, I got to watch it in detail, but that sounds like an example of guilt tripping, where he tried to play on her emotions or make her feel bad for not having sex with him so that he can get her to have sex with him by guilt tripping her. So these are things that are kind of all like under the umbrella of manipulation. Sometimes people don't realize they're doing it at the time because it's so ingrained, or it's such a it's such a behavior pattern for them that it's just normal, or it's been done to them a lot, that it's been normalized. And so sometimes it's hard to see manipulation when it's happening in real time because we're used to it, for lack of a better term. But it's still not healthy, and it's still not okay, and we do not need to be perpetuating stuff like that. It's toxic, it's unhealthy, and listen, y'all, it's harder to get out of the habit of doing it when you've already been doing it for so long. But I'm trying my best to not criticize my son as much. Sometimes I got to get on his dad about it because, my son, he'll want to pick out a pair of shoes, and his dad will say things like, you want those? Like, listen to the judgment and the tone, right? And so I peep it when he does it, and I try my best not to keep doing stuff like that. So when he says he wants something or he wants to do something, I try my best not to come from a place of judgment, or to try to change his mind, or to try to get him to agree with what I think he should have. I try to let him practice free thinking, and I'm trying to support him a lot more. You know, mom guilt is a thing, y'all. I struggle with it. Even though I don't look at myself as a bad mom, I just look at myself as a human person who just be making mistakes, okay? Like, I'm trying my best to be a good mother. That's one of the most important things for me to do in my life. Um, Actually, probably the most important thing for me to do in my life is just try to be the best that I can. But I just know I'm gonna mess up and make mistakes, and whew, that's emotional for me. But that's probably the only thing that can invoke that intensity of emotions for me, because I think I mentioned on one of my videos I'm not a super emotional person, or at least I don't always sit in my emotions a lot. But that is one of the things. So me being the best mom I can be, you know, not just from a standpoint of protecting him and providing for him, but also nurturing him and connecting with him and bonding with him, and, you know, being able to heal from things that I've done wrong and try to do better moving forward, because I know we all do things wrong as mothers. We get in our feelings because we're human. We got the feelings, right? Like, we want what we want for our kids. We want them to be this, we want them to do that. And we have emotions. When they don't do it the way we think they're supposed to, we're frustrated. And then we might yell or we might criticize. And if we expect them to do better with their emotions, we gotta do better with ours. You know, we can't just be so reactive all the time to things that are triggering for us, the things that make us frustrated. You know, it's not cool, it's not right, it's not healthy, and it don't model healthy behaviors to them. That's the thing that always kill me about parents, is that we expect them to not lash out when they're pissed. We expect them to not yell, scream, throw stuff, and, you know, if they do, we whooping ass, right? But when we're mad, we get to yell and we get to cuss and we get to criticize, right? No, that's not right. We should be able to say, okay, what's the healthy way to deal with this feeling? And how do I need to approach my child in terms of how I would hope that they would approach other people when they're upset? You know, I have to model the behavior that I want to see from them, and I have to be a healthy model. You know, I can't just be out here just impulsively reacting because I'm mad. And a lot of parents will tell their kids, like, son, you made me mad, so that's why I did that. I just wanted to take a moment of silence so you can listen to how that sounds. If your kid ever came up to you and said, Mom, you made me mad, that's why I smacked you, is that going to be acceptable from your child smacking you? Or is it only acceptable when your child make you mad that you get to smack them? Now, I ain't never been a physical parent, okay? I don't really physically discipline my child at all. My child can't tell you the last time he got a whooping. So I guess technically I do gentle parenting, but it's not gentle in the way that y'all think, because a lot of people confuse gentle parenting. It's not like always soft, calm. Oh, baby, do whatever you want to do. Like, that's not real gentle parenting. But to a sense, I do gentle parenting because I don't whoop my kid. And my mom didn't really whoop me a lot as a child, because I was a little bit more sensitive. You can use your words and talk to me, you know, and that's what I'm trying to teach my son, is to practice using his words and understanding and critical thinking and logic and reasoning and just healthy reaction. So anyway, yeah, that was a lot. But my next video, I'm hoping to dive a little bit more into manipulation. I'm gonna get into the experiences stuff a little bit later. I was just trying to throw that in there so I don't forget to bring it up later. But we're gonna keep going with manipulation for a while. Please interact with me, y'all. Leave in the comments how you've been manipulated. Give me some examples of how people have tried to manipulate you. Give some examples of how you have been manipulative in the past or present, and let's talk about it. You know, you can use me to relate to, and I'll tell you the best ways that I know that I've dealt with things. Um, and this is aside from me just doing, providing therapy. This is just me talking about my experiences as a therapist and as a human person. So Leave some comments. Let me know your experiences with manipulation, and let me know how you'd like me to touch on it. So, all right. See y'all next week. This is your favorite Detroit therapist, Ashley the therapist. And I'll be back with another video next week, trying to be consistent with this thing. All right, y'all.